this is a 10 Allen that fits right in here to take off this. I'm going to do this without draining any of the oil or the coolant and just see how it goes. And if it's a big mistake, then obviously I'll let you know. But I should get some oil dripping out of here. So what I've done is I've shoved a ton of rags down there to protect the belt. So it shouldn't be a ton of oil, but it might have some oil dripping out of these lines right here. Make sure the gasket, there's a metal washer that comes with it, so make sure that comes off. To avoid as much oil spilling out when I take these hoses off as I can, just reaching down in there with a tube and a suction, and I'm suctioning out the remaining oil that's kind of sitting in there. Okay, once you get most of the oil out, it'll look pretty clean in there. And for reference, this cup I got here is about 1.5 inches of oil down in the bottom. So there's quite a bit that you're gonna get out. So it's a good idea to suction it out before you just let it drip all over the place. I'll take a 13 and reach underneath here. And right in the center of these two oil lines, there's a 13 millimeter to loosen up and take out. Once that 13 millimeters out, you can wiggle these lines back and forth, or you can take like some blunt-headed instrument and kind of tap on the bottom of this sealing surface. Just do it gently, and then it should break loose, and then the whole thing will kind of slide down and out. And I actually only got, since I drained the oil or suctioned it out, I only got 1 drop of oil, 2 drops of oil that have come down out of there. So that was well worth my time to suction that oil out of there. Now I'm just gonna get a bungee cord and kind of just hold this up out of the way. Now, if for some reason all you want to do is change out the gasket in here on the oil cooler line housing, then you can do that. So just these E14, there's 1, 2, and then there's one right in the middle under here. So once you take off those oil lines, you can get to that with a small extension. I've already loosened these up. And again, some oil will drip out, so it has some rags down below this area. And these 3 bolts are the same size, so you don't have to worry about mixing them up. Once the bolts are out, you should be able to pull this off. It might stick a little because of the gasket. And again, some oil will leak out there, and that's why we have these rags. And so if you're just doing this gasket, you can get to it. Just use a pick here to get this thing out of here. Hopefully it comes out all in one piece. There we go. Okay. Now just work it around. And so then I would clean the surface in the groove there a little bit, put in the new gasket, and then reassemble. But I'm going to also take off the oil filter housing, and to do that I have to take off the intake, or at least move the intake slightly aft to get to one of the bolts. Okay, to remove the intake, there's a vacuum hose here. You just pull straight up and it'll come out it'll be hard to see where it goes, but you'll be able to move this aside and fit it back in after. And then there's a bunch of 11 millimeters, so 11 millimeter bolt here, some nuts. So just go down and remove all those 11 millimeter bolts and nuts. As you're going through and taking out these nuts, have a magnet handy so you can screw them and then have a magnet in there to be able to make sure you don't drop them. Next, I'll pull up on this clip here on the throttle body hose, and you can remove that. And then you should be able to wiggle out this hose. It might be a little tight here. Okay. Actually, that might be enough to get into this bolt. I just had to move it up just a little bit. I'll show you where the bolt is that we're trying to get to. It's right here. Okay, now this E12 here, the one that's tough to get to, I can access that now. And then there's E12 up here on the top. And so we can remove both of those for now. And there's one more down here below. I'll show you how to get to that one in a second. At the top, it's a really long one. And then the one that's tough to get to is this shorter one. Okay, for the last one, it's tough to do too, but you need a really small, what I've got here is a 6-sided 5/16. And so if you get a really small 5/16 6-sided, you can get in there and put it on there, and then you'll be able to turn it. Before I loosen up that last bolt, I'm going to take off this coolant line, just disconnect that from here. Again, some coolant will leak out, but wedge a ton of rags up in there to soak it up. And just pop this clip out of here, and then you just pull on the coolant line. Okay, so you take off this hose. Try to do it slowly so the coolant can leak out a little at a time. And then right here you just crack loose this E12 with your 5/16 wrench, and then you can loosen it. And about 3 hours later, that bolt will come out. It is the smallest of the three for the oil filter housing, so you can't really mix them up. Okay, now the housing should pull off. There is an electrical connection up here that I've already removed. I've set it aside. And so now it should come right off. While I'm in here, I think I'm gonna just replace the belt. It's 40 bucks for a new one, and it's worth 40 bucks for me to not have to take everything apart again to get back in here. So basically I've got it to a position where I've taken apart enough that I can get in here and do it. It's a T60 to loosen up the belt tensioner, and then I just got an Allen here. There's a lot of different Allens that'll fit in there, but just to hold the pin in place, or the tensioner in place, so that the belt will be loose enough to slide it off of all the pulleys. Okay, so I just put the T60 in there, loosen up this belt tensioner, and then slide the Allen in so that it holds it in place. And then I could take this out and pop the belt off of all the pulleys. Okay, the new belt I'm going to feed around the main crank pulley first, and then I'll route it from there. Alright, so you just gotta fish it down in there, and I'm sorry that it's so dark, but I got a light directly on it, but it's still, there we go, try that. Okay, so you just gotta fish it around down there, and I used a wooden dowel poking it down in there to try to kind of lever it onto all these pulleys. So get it on the big pulley and then up over this idler here, and then down again to this lower pulley for the what's that? Yeah, down to the bottom pulley again, and get those on first, and then that'll help everything out. Okay, so it's really not as difficult as it might look. It takes a while, but the last one you should put on is this top pulley here, because it can slide right on. And make sure the grooves of the belt are in place on all the pulleys, and you should be good to go. You can release the tension. Okay, now I embedded the new gasket inside of the oil filter housing, and I'm gonna put that into place and mount it on the car. Okay, put the 3 bolts back in, 1, 2, and 3 down there, and then tighten them up with the E11. I think I said E12 last time, but these are E11s. Okay, tighten these down to 22 newton meters. Obviously you won't be able to tighten this bottom one down to 22 newton meters, but try to get it as close as you can by feel. And I've been told that these are aluminum bolts, or I've read online that they're aluminum, and therefore you need to get new ones every time you change this gasket, but mine are definitely steel. So I did not replace them, I just put the new one, the old ones back in. And then put the gasket inside of the sealing surface there, and then mount this on the right way. Obviously you can only go one way. And again, these on my car are steel bolts, so I'm reusing the old ones. Okay, and tighten these down evenly, these E14s. They actually might be E13s, but the E14 fits a little loose, but I don't have an E13. But you only tighten them down to 16 newton meters, so it's not that big of a deal. Now this upper radiator hose, I'm going to connect to its position. Make sure that the clip is pushed into place, and then you'll hear an audible click when it is seated into position. If I can get enough leverage on it. There we go. Okay, now I put the gaskets, the new gaskets, or O-rings I should say, on these 2 pipes, and then put them up into place, and then put this 13mm bolt back in from the bottom. Okay, I don't know of a torque spec for this bolt down here, but I'm gonna basically make it snug. It just has to really compress those O-rings in order to make a sealing surface. So I'm not gonna really tighten it down too much. Okay. And it might look like, I'll show you a picture here on a inset of the video, but it looks like there's a gap down here, but it's what it's supposed to look like. I checked mine before I took it off, and it doesn't snug up completely so that this sealing surface is onto the actual housing here. So if you see a little gap down there, then it's okay, just as long as the bolt is tightened down. Before I put these two caps on and the oil filter cap on with the new filter, I topped up these little reservoirs. Since I had to pull oil out of them, I topped them up with some fresh oil. Just be careful you don't overflow them. And I also put some oil in the oil filter housing. There's a pump priming process you need to do, I guess, after you do this job, to make sure that oil gets through the system and you don't have too much friction in the engine when it first starts up. So I'm going to do that, but I also threw some oil in here, and I threw some oil in the housing here, just to make sure that the oil is where it needs to be, and to kind of protect myself as much as I can. Before I drop the intake manifold back into place, I'm going to put on in new gaskets here. And you don't have to take the manifold all the way off. It's just to feel the groove and put the new gasket into place. Okay, now you just kind of work the intake back into place. Make sure you don't pinch any of the wires. And it should sit back on the posts that it came off of, obviously. Now that I got it on the posts, I'm just checking, feeling for the gasket just to make sure that it didn't pop out any of them. And before I press it all the way into place. Okay, torque down the two bolts and the nuts for the intake manifold to 15 Newton meters. They recommend getting new bolts, but I didn't do it again. Mine were steel. So, okay, behind the alternator here is this vacuum port. I'm touching it with the top of my finger right there, and that's where this line. Let's see if I'm getting that in the picture. This line that comes over the top of the valve cover and then goes down past or through the intake manifold. You have to connect that onto that port right there. It's coming down right through here past the positive terminal here, and then down right there. Okay, behind the engine, make sure, or the first wires, two wiring looms for the O2 sensors come back around here, and you gotta kind of put them into some channels, some plastic channels back here that they kind of sit into. It's really hard to get a picture of, but back behind here, and then back behind the valve cover, there's some channels that they sit in. Okay, and make sure you push the pin or the clip back into place. I'll reconnect that electrical connection. And then these wires come down here. There's a plastic channel here that they kind of sit into. Right there. Okay. All right, now that's the finished with the intake manifold.